Good evening, everybody. I'm Nikki Junkins, President of the League of Women Voters of Volusia County, and I'm delighted to invite and welcome everybody with us tonight for our program of homelessness in the community. For many years, our cities have been struggling with the growing number of homeless individuals, and COVID-19 only makes the situation more challenging. We're very fortunate tonight to have three very knowledgeable speakers with us who are on the front lines of supporting the homeless people in our communities. And I want to thank them personally for taking time from their busy schedules for being with us tonight. Before we get to our presentation, I want to thank Mary Ann Connors. Mary Ann is on our board. She chairs the growth management team. She is also the person who is the coordinator of our monthly programs. I want to thank for the hours of work that she puts in to make these programs possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ann so that she can introduce our guest speakers. Mary Ann.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to our guests who are presenting this evening. They are all directors with 3 different homeless programs in Volusia County, and are bringing to us their different experiences with the audiences that they work with. First one is Buck James. Buck is the executive director at Halifax Urban Ministries. He served 25 years in higher education administration, where he built teams to provide seamless point of contact services to students and families. He then developed one of the first one-stop shop services for students and was an early adopter of social media strategy while at Palm Beach Atlantic University. Later at Abilene Christian University in Texas, he led teams in raising the visibility of the university and improving both the quality and diversity of the student body. At Daytona State, Buck has brought the student-focused perspective of a private university to a public college, with administrative leadership in the areas of admission, financial aid, academic advising, and student life. Now at Halifax Urban Ministries, Buck leads a faith-based ministry committed to preventing homelessness and intervening in the lives of those who have become homeless. Each year, Halifax Urban Ministries serves over 90,000 hot meals, delivers 30,000 Feed a Family food bags through a network of 9 food pantries, and distributes 8,000 Food Brings Hope weekend food packages to the families of school-age children who are food insecure. Then we have Victoria Fahlberg. Dr. Fahlberg is a PhD in clinical psychology and a Master of Public Health in Population and International Health from Harvard. She has founded 2 successful nonprofits, one in Lowell, Massachusetts, and the other in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She's brought strong leadership, administrative skills, and fundraising to the First Step Shelter. She is a published author and co-editor in the field of domestic violence. She has been recognized as a community leader and was named among the Citizens of the Year and 25 Most Fascinating People and Women Making a Difference in Lowell, Massachusetts. Finally, we have Waylon Neese. Waylon has been working in social services for over 15 years. In 2010, Waylon decided to make a life change, and step out of the volunteering role at the neighborhood center in DeLand while he continued his education at Stetson University, majoring in sociology and psychology. Shortly after being dedicated to the mission of the neighborhood center as a volunteer, he became employed as the shelter coordinator. He is an active member of the Rotary Club in DeLand and is on the DeLand Main Street Association. He also serves the county as chairman of the Volusia County Human Services Advisory Board and is on the Volusia County Affordable Housing Committee. We thank all of our speakers for bringing their experiences and their knowledge to share with us today. each deal with slightly different populations. And so, Buck, I'll start with you. Halifax Urban Ministries has a long history in the community. Would you tell us what's going on with Hope Place?
Sure. And I'll also talk a little bit about Barracks of Hope as well, which provides similar services to the veteran community.
Wonderful.
But most of you probably have heard of Hope Place. Hope Place is the repurposed Hearst Elementary School that the school was rebuilt as the Champion Elementary School. And that's typical in many communities. In fact, all over the United States, pretty much every community has old schools that have been, in effect, abandoned as new schools have been built for a lot of different reasons. It's usually just cheaper to build new schools than to try to rebuild, and also just the logistics of trying to build or if you were going to try to refurbish a school at the same time that you were carrying on with school activities, would be very difficult, as you can imagine. And if you know anything about older schools like Hearst Elementary, new schools don't look anything like those old buildings. You know, the issues we have today with security and all those other reasons. Usually what happens is school boards decide to build a new school at a new location. And that is what happened at Hearst Elementary. But back about 10 years ago now, time flies. One of our former executive directors, Troy Ray, was at a dedication of a building that was just one house north of the old Hearst Elementary property. And he pointed out at the property to Farouk Hosseini. We all know the Hosseini family, ICI Homes. And she has a real heart for children. And they actually were dedicating a home that she had purchased to turn into a group home for high school students who did not have any parental support, so that they would have a place to live while they were finishing their high school education. And so at that event, he pointed out across the field at Hearst Elementary and said, can you envision a day that that would be housing for homeless families with children? And that began the process, which included many people. Volusia County was involved, Volusia County schools, many local cities, businesses, individuals were involved in getting that property and repurposing it to become housing for homeless families with children. And also a second group that we serve there is unaccompanied youth, which would be defined as 18 to 24 with no family support. And so we have been operational now since the beginning of 2018. And we serve 35 families at any one time, and also 15 to 20 unaccompanied youth. So I'm getting into some of the later questions, but we typically have about 150 people living on the campus at any one time. And so we've been operational now for almost 3 full years. And I'll leave some of the other answers for later. I know that you all have some questions about outcomes and those sorts of things. So. Would you like me to continue talking about that, or what would you like for me to respond to questions? How would you like for me to proceed?
Buck, if you could, complete your presentation.
Oh, sure.
And then we'll let the whole panel take questions. Thanks.
So I'll respond to some of the questions that I was provided with. The process to enter Hope Place. So what would happen is people can be referred to us in a lot of different ways. They can refer themselves, in effect, because many people are familiar with us in the community. They might be referred by a church or another organization, the neighborhood center, or First Step. They might refer us. So there's the police. It could come from any variety of different places. Sometimes people find us on the internet. And the starting point would be to reach out to us, and then we schedule a phone interview with one of our case managers, and they do some initial collection of information and let the person know what kinds of documentation we're going to need in order for them to enter. And then we schedule, at that point, we schedule them an in-person interview and also tour the facility, because it's very important that it be a mutual decision. Some families come and they tour the facility and they hear us talk about the program and they just decide it's not something they want to pursue. And that's okay. That's okay. So that's all part of the process. And we have, since we opened, we've always had a waiting list. So it is almost never is it possible for a family to show up and move in on the same day. Because unfortunately, there are more homeless families out there than there is available housing. And so the program at Hope Place is a 90-day program. And so that's one of the things that we talk to people about at the very beginning, is that we do have an expectation that they be working through a process that's going to end with them moving into permanent housing within 90 days. And that doesn't always happen. 90 days isn't a black and white rule, but it's a goal. And not every family situation is completely different. And sometimes a family, the fastest we've ever had, actually, believe it or not, was 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and the family was able to move into permanent housing without any additional assistance for us. They actually came to us. It was, we see situations all the time where people are unfortunately taken advantage of by various people. Sometimes we had a situation just recently. Daytona Beach Police came to us. They had just noticed a building as being condemned, and there were 10 different groups of people living in the building who were paying rent to somebody that they believed owned the building, that it turned out did not even own the building. So they'd been paying rent for months to somebody who was just taking their money. And so we helped those folks to get relocated. So that was one we were able to turn around very quickly, and they actually never ended up in a place. But the point is that sometimes people come to us because they've been taken advantage of by someone else. And that was the case of the person who left in 2 weeks. It was a very similar situation. They were renting a home from someone, and one day police showed up at the door and posted a notice that they had 24 hours to leave because the person that they were paying rent to did not own the home. And so anyway, sometimes every situation is different. And sometimes we have a situation, for instance, if you had a single parent who was making $10.50 or $11 an hour and maybe was struggling with some other issues, they might not be ready to move on within 90 days. But our general rule of thumb on things like that is that if the person or family is doing the things they should be doing, we're obviously not going to put them out on the streets just because the 90-day clock finished, but we're going to give them an opportunity to continue working through the process and to gain housing. And so that's basically how our process works. And I've got some stats for you here. Let's see. So in 2020, this is year to date. This is not 12 months worth of data, but this is year to date data for 2020. At Hope Place, in the emergency shelter for families, we have served 89 households. That's 328 persons, including 194 children. We have currently this year a 94.7% success rate upon exit. That means that almost 95% of the folks when they leave are moving out into permanent housing or some other positive outcome. And our average length of stay so far this year is 84 days. So we're below that 90-day target that we have. We also at Hope Place have transitional housing. That is, we have 6 apartments where we can house families in what's called transitional housing. We have so far served this year 11 households with 45 persons and 20 children with a 100% success rate upon exit. We also have 3 apartments that are permanent supportive housing. That's for a family where the head of the household has some kind of disability. It could be a physical disability, it could be a mental health issue, those sorts of things. And permanent supportive housing, in theory, could be permanent, although in our case, our goal is to help those folks to move out into the permanent, into the community as well. So we've served 4 families so far, with 3 apartments. We've served 4. That means that 1 family did move out into the community. Total of 12 persons and 6 children with 100% success rate on exit. We also have served 25 unaccompanied youth during that period of time. The youth are the one group that have a much longer period of time that they can stay. Basically, our rule for the youth is that they can stay on property as long as they are making progress in school or some form of bettering themselves in terms of providing for an opportunity for a good future career and so forth. So they can actually stay up until they age out at the age of 25, as long as they're being a good member of our community and making progress in school or some other positive outcome like that. And then lastly, I wanted to mention the Barracks of Hope, where we serve veterans. We serve 20 veterans at any one time. So far this year, we've served 62 veterans with a 72% success rate upon exit. Let's see, one of your questions was, how is success defined? Well, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, defines success as moving into permanent housing. That's basically the way that they define success. But there are some other situations that we count as success as well. For instance, if an individual or family moves in with their family and the family are committed to supporting them and so forth, we view that, I think most people would view that as a positive outcome. And how is the program funded? At Hope Place and also at the Barracks of Hope, a lot of our funding comes from donations from individuals, from groups, from churches, other organizations. We do receive some funding from local, state, and federal government. Mostly the state and federal government funding, actually almost all the state and federal funding is helping people to move out into permanent housing. So for instance, if you're familiar with the terminology of rapid rehousing, is one of the ways where we can receive state or federal funding that helps a family or an individual to get established in permanent housing. So for instance, even if you had a two-parent household, if both of those parents are making $10.50 or $11 an hour, they can fairly quickly get into a position where they could afford to pay a monthly rent and utilities. And we work with them from day one on budgeting classes and those sorts of things so they can be successful. But it would take them years to save $3,000 or $4,000 to be able to move out on their own. So sometimes the way that rapid rehousing can help, the funding that comes from federal and state government, might be used to help out with the security deposit, first, last, the moving costs for a family to get established into housing. And let's see, what governments participate. So we've had support from, I mentioned earlier, Volusia County government was very instrumental in helping us to acquire the property and then to rehab the property to turn it into housing for formerly homeless. But in that process, we also received a lot of help from other local municipal governments as well, and we continue to receive some of that support from time to time. We also receive, I mentioned, grant funding from the state and federal government. Most of that funding, that funding doesn't go to help us with operations, but it does help us with helping families to get established into permanent housing in the community. Volunteers. Volunteers do play a critical role in everything we do at Halifax Urban Ministries. We actually, on an annual basis, we average over 30,000 hours of community service, volunteer service every year. And specifically at Hope Place, that's in a lot of different ways. We have some folks to come in. For instance, there's a group of nurses from one of our local hospitals who come in once a month, every month. Once a month, every month. But they've been doing this for a long, long time, and they cook one of the dinners at Hope Place. And before we were at Hope Place, when we were at our former facility, they did the same thing there. So we have people that help out with the kitchen. We have people that help out with children in a variety of different ways. We have some people who commit to come in and to do AA and NA groups and those sorts of things to help people who are struggling with substance abuse. Others that come in and help with everything from training on budgeting and financial things, those sorts of things, to people who come and help out with maintenance of the facilities, and it's just a wide variety of different things that people help out with, and we really could not operate without the help of all of those volunteers. So you had a question on how has the COVID-19 changed the demand for and delivery of services. Well, what I would say is so far, and I think this is a really important topic that I think the others will want to address too, because I think this is a place where League of Women Voters can really become informed and to help the constituency to understand these issues better. But what I would say is that up until this point, what we have seen is a huge spike in demand on what we would call homeless prevention services. So for instance, today, the reason why I'm wearing this, bright, ugly, yellow fluorescent shirt is that every Tuesday since the third week of May, we run the logistics at the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach we bring volunteers in and we bag groceries that get distributed all over the county. In fact, Neighborhood Center every week picks up 250 bags that they distribute in DeLand. And literally, these bags are going to every corner of our county from Oak Hill, Edgewater, New Smyrna, Port Orange, South Daytona, Daytona, Holly Hill, Deltona, DeLand, Orange City, Enterprise, they're going all over the county. We have been, since we started that project, we have distributed over 30,000 bags of food and over 600,000 pounds of food through that process. So every Tuesday, right now we're doing 2,700 bags. We did 2,700 bags of groceries today that went out all over our community. So up until this point, what I would say, and be interested to see what the others say, is mostly we've seen a spike in those kinds of needs, which we would consider homeless prevention, helping people to stay in their housing. What we say at Halifax Urban Ministries is that helping people, we have a regular program on an annual basis called Feed a Family that distributes grocery bags to families. And we say that's the first line of defense against homelessness. So in other words, if we can provide a bag of good, nutritious groceries to a family and reduce their grocery bill, then they have more money to pay FP&L, they have more money to pay their rent so that they can stay in housing. But what I would say, and we can talk about this some more later, is that what we haven't seen yet, I don't think, and I think that there's a pending avalanche at some point, is in a huge spike in homelessness as a result of COVID-19, partly because of things like there's been a moratorium on evictions, things like this that have artificially held down those numbers. And I think rightfully so. I'm not saying that I think those things were bad decisions, but the day is coming when we're going to have to reckon with all of that, because at some point they're going to have to remove that moratorium. And at some point, some of these other things, some of the money that's flowing now from federal and state government and other places, that money is going to slow down and ultimately stop. And so I think we need to be preparing ourselves for the time when we're going to have a huge spike in the need for families and individuals that are going to find themselves homeless.
Okay. That's interesting, Buck. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, we've deferred a lot of the impacts of COVID, and they will come to us. Victoria, you're dealing with a different group and a different program. It's still fairly new. Could you tell us about how First Step is doing?
Sure, and thank you very much for inviting me. So First Step opened its doors December 16th for the first time. So we are really new, not even a year yet. And in the short time that we've been open, we've already gone through a transition. As many of you may know, we opened with an operator, contracted operator with Catholic Charities. And probably it was about April or May that there were just some philosophical differences with the board and the operator. And so they decided that they were going to leave. It was pretty mutual. So I took over starting on August 1st. So I've only been in charge of the entire operation for a little bit over a month. So the good news is it's been doing, in my opinion, really well. I think that the people that were operating it before, as the people who are operating it now, me, we all have a lot to learn. We haven't had the opportunity to, get to know the population as well as we need to make sure that all of our procedures are just going the way that they should. And so I could just share a little bit with you about that. But the population that we serve are considered the chronically homeless adult individuals. And I think that when people think of homelessness, this is the kind of person they often think of as somebody that they see a single adult who may be sleeping in the park or, maybe panhandling, something like that. And so that's the population that we serve. So the shelter has the capacity to serve up to 100 people, but where our current budget is to service up to 45. We were chugging along fairly well, and then the pandemic hit. And at that time, when the shelter in place occurred, the board decided that we would stop doing intakes until further notice. So before I go into that, I just want to tell you a little bit more about our eligibility criteria and how people get into the shelter. When people want to come into the shelter, similar to what Buck was saying, we need to have people who are referred because we need a chance to do a background screen before they come in. It's pretty simple. We'll take people who are referred from social services, from churches, from law enforcement, is from where we get a lot of our referrals. And we get a lot also from Advent Health and Halifax Health. Unlike, I think what Buck said is we don't take people who just walk up because we need a chance to screen people first. The things that we're primarily screening for are to be sure we don't take sex predators and we don't take people who have open warrants. So once the warrants are cleared, we'll take people. I would say that a good number of the people who come through First Step Shelter have a criminal background. But with the sex predators, we do serve men and women. The other thing is we don't have individual places for people to stay. We have a women's dorm that houses up to 40. We have a men's dorm that can house up to 60. So and then we also have like a big main area, which is where people will congregate both for recreation, for classes, for food, which are the main things. So the other things that we've learned as we've gone along, I think, these are things that you learn along the way, but that is how to be more successful. So when we first opened, pretty much everybody was coming in and they were being entered as an intake before they had actually, as Buck was talking, the importance about giving people a tour and letting them understand what the circumstances are in which they will be living. Because in our group of people, we do have a lot of people that come in with substance abuse disorders. And people, initially, a lot of people had an idea that they would just be able to kind of continue living life as they had been. But our focus is on rehabilitation. And so when people come into our program, they have to agree to not drink alcohol or to take unprescribed drugs, drugs that should be prescribed but aren't, or meth or K2 or whatever else. They're not going to be doing that in the shelter because, as I said, our focus is on helping people to rehabilitate. And we do also define success as people being able to go into housing and stay in housing. And so when people do come in, we have a process that they go through. Many people who come to us, they do not have any form of identification. They often do not even have a birth certificate. We had one resident who had been through the whole foster care system his entire life. He'd lived in many places and had used so many different aliases that it took us a couple of months to even figure out what his name was and where he was born in order to get him a birth certificate, in order to get him the other services that he needed. And so those are just some of the challenges that we face. The other thing that we've learned is that we've had people come who really are not ambulatory. They can't take a shower on their own and they can't use the toilet on their own. And we are not equipped with the staff or the other things that you need to be, we're not, we can't provide like a nursing home assistance or even assisted living. We're just not set up for that. And so those are some of the other challenges that we encountered when we first opened our doors, because we weren't really clear enough, I think, in our screening. The other thing that we've encountered is we've had people come to us who are actually terminally ill and more in need of hospice care than in need of a shelter, but they have no money to go into hospice. We actually have a person who's living with us and she is not going to be going into housing. We actually have 3 people at the shelter right now who I don't see ever being able to live independently. So that was the purpose. The first step is to help people to eventually become stable, to have an income, whether that's through Social Security disability, or through having a job. But what we've learned is that many people who are in this category of the chronically homeless adult individuals, they really aren't capable of taking care of themselves. So we do have one woman who's terminally ill with cancer, and we're basically taking care of her. We have a person there who can't really walk. And then we have another person who has an extremely low IQ, and I can't see her living on her own either. She is able to work. She's doing cleaning. She's cleaning a nursing home, but and that's been really great for her. So part of what we're doing is we're going through our own process of understanding how we can help people and what services are out there in the community that can help people that we're trying to serve, and who we can partner with for people that we really aren't able to serve. And so for us, it's this whole learning process. I wish we were at a point where I could just be, just giving things a lot more clear, but really that's not where we're at. And especially since I just took over, I was able to observe as much as I could the challenges that had existed prior to me coming in. But I have learned that, and I did learn a lot, and plus I did get to know the residents that were there, and I did see what the needs were. Another whole challenge that we have is when we get people who come into the shelter who are able to work. Number one, if they have a criminal background, that can be difficult, but not something that we haven't been able to overcome. That also is a barrier when we try to put them into housing, because a lot of the landlords don't want people with a criminal background. But one of the biggest things is that they're not eligible for Medicaid, because they're just an adult who's an individual, and if they're not on disability, then they don't qualify for Medicaid. And so then they're stuck without health care. And many, like so far, the people that we have been able to get into work that come in with a lot of these challenges, they regularly don't get jobs where they're able to get full-time benefits, which would include health care. So those are just kind of the challenges that we've encountered. And I'm sharing those with you because that's really what is foremost on my mind. The things that have impacted us with COVID has been with our whole operation. When we decided to stop taking intakes, that was, the thing that we needed to do at the time. Because, like I said, it's all congregate living. Everybody's living in dormitories, and we had no way of keeping people separate. And so we actually have been extremely fortunate that we have not had any COVID outbreaks at the shelter. And I'm just, I'm very grateful that that hasn't happened. But so in not doing intakes, we have been able to put a lot of people into housing. And in fact, we've, out of the 93 who come through the shelter, we have been able to put 44 people into housing so far. We currently are down to only 10 people in the shelter because of the ban on bringing new people in. And so most recently, and we don't have almost any room. The shelter is quite large, but it's basically 3 very large areas without kind of separate areas. We have the administrative area. We also have the health unit, which is extremely important to us in terms of when we do our intakes, and for the whole health screening and ongoing care of our residents. And also the nurses there have been a godsend to us because, as I said, we get some very sick people. I would say that close to 80% of our residents have medical histories in which they like hypertension, diabetes, those kind of chronic diseases. And so having the nurses there helping to ensure their medication compliance. We also have a pretty high number, probably close to 50% of our residents who are on psychotropic medications. I mean, a whole nother thing that I've learned too is that there's not any services out there. There's a service through a healthcare provider that will provide a discount for prescription medications, but it's only a discount. And we have some of our residents who are taking more than 1 prescription. And so every month it's costly. And if they have no income, I just recently had to redo our budget, and I put extra money into our budget that I didn't even know we needed to help pay for prescription medications. So that's another issue. We are going to be starting, it actually started today, is we have gotten down our numbers such that we were able to move the women residents, of whom we now have 4, we moved them into the health unit. And we have beds in there so they can actually live there for now. And then we're going to be bringing new male residents into our women's dorm area and quarantining them for the recommended time. And then we're going to then be able to transfer them into the men's dorm if they're COVID free. So it's been extremely difficult for us actually trying to adopt all these new COVID precautions and able to keep our population coming in. My staff also, I have a number of elderly staff people, and they have their own concerns. We have done everything possible in terms of everybody, the rules around wearing masks, the rules around sanitation, just all of the cleaning that goes on. Nobody comes into our shelter, including myself, without having a temperature check. If anybody sneezes, they have to go see the nurse. So we've had to really be quite cautious around all of that, because our big concern is if we have one resident who comes down with coronavirus, because of our setup as a congregate shelter, like everybody is, we're just concerned that it could spread very quickly. And so we're really concerned about that. But I am very excited that we are starting to do intakes now. And the other thing I need to mention is that we just recently received funding from the county. It's part of the CARES Act. And so we're going to be able to build a quarantine area onto the shelter. And so what that means at that point is then the women's dorm can be freed up again, and we'll be able to take women in. And then we'll be able to build up our population of women, and we won't need to use the women's dorm anymore or the health unit. So those are the kind of the things there's a lot more things I could say, but I do know I want to be sensitive to the time. And I can also take a lot of questions when we're done. And I just am going to mention one more thing. Our shelter was built to be able to, it's not by law or whatever the regulations are called a hurricane shelter, but it can withstand winds up to 150 miles an hour the way it was built. And so the other really great thing for us is with the COVID funding that we just received, we're going to be able to put up a partition in the center room of the shelter, so that when other homeless people need to immediately find a place to go, we will be able to immediately bring those people into the shelter and still keep them separate from our already sort of COVID-free regular population. And we'll be able to use the same partition for a cold weather shelter, because we do have a lot of space up there, and we do want to be able to make it the best resource that we can for the county. And so those are the things that we have still needed. We also needed a generator. And so we're also going to be getting that. So we wanted to put those things in place. So those are the primary things about First Step. It's exciting, it's busy, and it's just like always a million things going on. And as myself and our staff really learn the ropes, as the other folks here have been doing this for a while, I think that we'll continue to make First Step better and better, and even a better place for the residents who are there, and a better place for our community. So, and I can answer any questions later.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Waylon, if you could talk to us about the neighborhood center. It's a bit different over on the west side. You've enjoyed real community support. Could you talk to us about that program? Unmute.
There we go. Got it.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, so it is a little bit different, but, very much like what Victoria and Buck had, mentioned, a lot of similarities in our programs in general. The mission of the neighborhood center is to feed the hungry, to provide shelter to the homeless, and to prevent homelessness. And Buck was talking a little bit ago about homeless prevention, which is a big part of what we do at the neighborhood center. But we stay true to our core mission of those three things, including, our value statement and working with our clients and treating them and our staff with dignity and respect, because that goes a long way. It's not always the easiest in working with the population that we deal with. As Victoria pointed out, a lot of times they do have mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and a lot of times they're actually co-occurring disorders. So thankfully, we have a pretty good staff that is trained in substance abuse and some mental illness, so we can facilitate, what we need to facilitate. But a little brief history of our agency. Not brief history. I can give you a big history, but a brief history. Since I've been with the agency for about 10 years, when I started, we had 7 staff, and we had our shelter and 3 transitional houses, and a little smidgen of prevention money. And since that time, Susan and I have made it not just a mission for the agency, but a mission for the community to build the agency, to build the mission, so that we could have a larger impact in the community. And a part of that is the community support that we receive. While we do receive a lot of funding from the city, from the county, from other municipalities, from the feds, et cetera, such as Buck was talking about, we enjoy and we are privileged actually for the abundance of community support that we get. Obviously, one of the reasons that I love DeLand as a community is that the community as a whole, not just the Rotary clubs, not just Main Street, not just the Kiwanis, but everybody really pours into the mission, and they pour into the community, because I believe that here, at least in our little bubble, we want to see a thriving community, and we understand that sometimes that's a bottom-up approach, and that we have to take care of the most vulnerable in our community if we're really going to thrive. Regardless of what religion you believe in, they all pretty much say the same thing. If you take care of your most vulnerable, that is the standard by which you are measured. And I believe that the neighborhood center and the community of DeLand, sees that as value, and we work on that in a pragmatic way to make it a reality for all of those that we serve. But a little bit about some of our various programs. We are very heavy on prevention, very much like what Buck was talking about, because we believe that if we can keep a family stabilized, especially a family, not just an individual, but anyone, a household, but primarily families, if we can keep them stabilized in their current place of housing, that reduces the mental and emotional well-being factors of the children and the stress on the family, and not to mention all of the additional costs which come from relocation. You have to start all over. You have to pay all of your deposits. You have to, put all of that moving and extra costs, and sometimes there's litigation and mitigation that's involved. So if we can assist a family staying where they are, it just helps with the long-term stabilization efforts on behalf of the agency and on behalf of the family themselves. So we believe very strongly in homeless prevention. In not only do we have homeless prevention, but we also have our food pantry. Buck talked about how we pick up some bags from him every week. In addition to what we pick up from Buck, what we pick up from Buck is in addition to what we currently do, in which we distribute approximately $1 million of food into our local community of West Volusia annually. That's about how much food that goes out. Every day we see about 70 heads of households that come through, and as they go through our line, it's set up actually like a grocery line. When they walk, we actually have carts that they push through, because they get a bag of canned goods, they get a bag of meat. Some of the meat looks phenomenal too, by the way. They get a bag of produce, they get a bag of pastries and other perishables along those lines. So when they walk out with about $200-300 worth of food per month. And again, as Buck stressed, that's kind of a leverage. That's an offset of income that they can then use those extra funds that they didn't have to spend in groceries to pay a light bill, or to put towards their deposit, or to put tires on the car so that they can get to work to put food on the table, or whatever it may be. So it really is kind of all a balancing and a juggling act. So that's just a little bit about our prevention piece. In addition, we do have a shelter. We have a shelter for single individuals, which currently houses 10. We have a family emergency shelter, which has 2 units. So thankfully, we have Buck that we can rely on to send families over to him and inundate his programs. Thank you, Buck. So we have a very small family shelter. We historically have primarily focused on individuals when it comes to shelter. Then we have our new bridge project. And our new bridge project is about to come online. We're currently doing some small things with the bridge project, feedings, some clothing giveaways, and some little things like that. But our new bridge shelter will be able to house an additional 30 individuals, males and females, in that program. And where the bridge differs from our current shelter programs is that our current shelter programs are designed and set up to be working shelters. So when you come in, kind of our screening process, I want to say, or the things that we rule out for in our current shelter is substance, so no drugs, no alcohol, and are you able to go out and look for a job? Are you able to go out and become employed? And if not, do you have Social Security income, or is it a possibility that we will be able to help you obtain that so that you would then be able to get into one of our other housing programs? Because the way we define success is obviously based on HUD's definition of success, which is moving into permanent housing. But what is permanent housing? We also know that in Volusia Flagler, primarily Volusia, over 45% of our population lives below the ALICE threshold. If you're not familiar with the ALICE threshold, the ALICE threshold is asset, limited, income, constrained, employed. So these are employed people who go to work, sometimes both heads of household, and maybe even the children. I worked as a child to make ends meet. So these are households that have income, yet they still are falling in a sense of poverty. One thing, the tires on the car, or some small thing could totally throw that family into an episode of homelessness. So what is permanent housing, right? At the end of the day. So while that is the overall goal, is permanent housing, we also define success in a few different ways. Are our clients able to get a job and maintain a job? Are our clients constantly relapsing, or are they staying sober, and are they staying on the straight and narrow path? Are they taking their mental health medication or their other physical health medications appropriately and as distributed? are they staying on top of other, trivial factors in their lives, such as, working on, and Buck said this, that as long as the kids are doing something positive, then they get to stay in the program. Well, it's very similar with us. And that's how we define success. Every client that comes in, we develop what's called an individual service plan. And then our case managers work very specifically with each one of them. And if they're hitting some of their various goals while they're staying with us, they may stay with us for a year, they may stay with us for 2 years, depending on what program they're in. We have some programs where people will stay with us for the rest of their life because they will never make enough to live on their own without the subsidized support of the program that we provide them. So success isn't always necessarily defined by money, by the type of job, or by the type of housing. Success is defined by, in my opinion, in addition to those things, success is defined by, are you meeting your goals? Are you continuing to be self-sustainable, even given the resources that we're providing you additionally? So, again, housing is very successful, but there's a lot of other little things, and I think that we can define success by as well. In our various housing programs, overall, we have in the community, we have, so we have our main campus, but then overall in the community, we have about 70 units. Some of those units are congregate living units. Some of those units are single family units. Overall, we house on a daily basis, not just in our shelter programs, but in all of our housing programs, excluding rapid rehousing. We house about 180 people, and that doesn't include the bridge. When the bridge comes on, we're going to add about another 30 to that. And we typically stay at capacity. So very much like what Buck and Victoria were talking about, is that it's not always a, hey, I'm showing up at your door and I need a place to stay. As a matter of fact, unfortunately today I had to turn 2 individuals away just because we were at capacity. Now, I gave them Buck's number and I sent him your way, Buck. So we do try to rely on our community partners to make this happen, because it's homelessness by far and large is not a one size fits all, and neither is the solution. The solution for homelessness isn't a shelter, it isn't a transitional house, it isn't a permanent supportive housing, and it isn't rapid rehousing. It's the combination of all of those things and adding in these other various components that Victoria was hitting on very strongly: dental care, prescription medication assistance, bus passes. It's all of these other little things that all have to connect with the housing piece and case management, which will make a household or individual successful, which then will make a community successful. I'm not sure, I feel like I just went on a tangent about all of that, but again, housing is not a one size fits all. So with our rapid rehousing, for example, a lot of people that come through our family shelter, well, what they need is not more shelter and not necessarily more transitional housing, but they might need rapid rehousing. So we can put them into a rapid rehousing program where we can pay all of their upfront costs, get them into an apartment or even a house with a lease, and then we can continue making payments for them for sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months. In some cases, it might be a year, where we do a tapered down payment effect. So might start with 100%, then we move it down to 50%, then down to 25, and then you're on your own. Some people it takes a year, some people it only takes 1 month. So every case is a little bit different. And currently we have 3 rapid rehousing programs, and one of them is specifically targeting victims of domestic violence. We just kicked that program off recently, I'm going to say July of this year. And since July, we've already enrolled 4 families into our domestic violence rapid rehousing program, where it's primarily, it could happen to a male, but it's primarily females with 1 or more children who are fleeing domestic violence and need a safe haven. And so we're able to provide that for them. That's one of those additional types of programs. We also run some HUD facilitated housing, permanent supportive housing, and some other just regular permanent housing opportunities, all at a reduced rate. so that people can flow through the continuum of care. So it may start at shelter, but then we have other levels of housing which work within the homeless arena so that we can flow them to that next level of housing. And then with the goal of eventually going into their own housing outside of any housing that we may have or that, Buck or Victoria may have. So overall, that's the goal. But on a daily basis, we house about 180 people in all of our various programs. I would say that we have about an 80 to 85% success rate. I haven't done any numbers recently to look at the success. I've been bogged down with the pandemic stuff. But on average, the majority of our people, they are able to transition out of our shelter into one of our other housing programs, which then provides them additional longevity and support while they stay in those programs. I'm just kind of looking at some of my notes here from some of the questions that you all had. A typical average stay is about 30 days for our single individuals. For our families, it's about 45 to 60. And there's nothing set in stone, but we monitor the progress of each individual, and then we pivot and adjust accordingly based on each individual case. A lot of our funding comes from grant funds. I write all the grants for the agency, so I know how much funding is coming in. But on top of that, we do get funding from the feds. We do get funding from state and local governments. But a big majority of our funding comes from our local partners and local civically engaged groups, such as you all, such as Rotary, such as all of the various ones. I can't think of them all right now. But on top of that, we have designed a lot of our transitional housing programs, and we're even allowed through our HUD programs to charge a certain percentage of rent. And so therefore we do. And then all of that money is able to go back into the programs for some agency generated revenue, which can then help to assist keep our programs running. So it's not all grant funded and it's not all donation based. We also believe that we have to hold our clients accountable, because without accountability, they're just going to run frivolously and do whatever it is that they want to do. So we have to hold them accountable, not just with their substance use and their medications and housing and so on and so forth. We have to hold them accountable with their finances. And that comes from taking responsibility to pay your rent and pay your rent on time. And that is, I would say, one of our biggest struggles, but at the same time, it's also one of our biggest successes, is teaching our clients money management skills so that they understand how to do that. So when they leave us, that they have some solid ground to stand on, something that they didn't have when they first came in. So when they leave, they don't return. Do people return? Absolutely, people return. Do people relapse and get dismissed from our programs? Absolutely. Happens all the time. Can't fix everything, but what we can do is provide the support and coach and guide people in the right direction to give them that sense of long-term sustainability and self-sufficiency.
Okay. Waylon, are you active throughout West Volusia? I know it's DeLand-based, but are you?
Yeah, we are DeLand based, but we serve all of the West Volusia community with the majority, obviously with all of our funds, we serve all of West Volusia. With some of our funds, we're able to serve all of Volusia County. And then with some of our funds, we're able to serve Volusia and Flagler County. So it just kind of depends on which funding stream, where the clients fit into, what it is they're looking for, as to which program or which type of assistance they get. So we serve all of Volusia, Flagler. Primarily, we serve West Volusia.
And you and Buck seem to have the most, I'll say, diverse clientele in that you deal with both individuals and families.
At this time, yes.
So it's and if I'm understanding your continuum, it sounds like homelessness is something a lot of people pass through. That it's something that is part of their life for a period of time, but that they're able to pass through that with support and re-enter the community with support. Is Is that accurate?
Well, absolutely. That's an accurate statement. And Victoria and Buck, feel free to pipe in at any time. But yeah, that is, it is. So one of the things that I think we have to do, not only as providers, but as community members, and not just here in DeLand, but all throughout the world, is we have to have a paradigm shift. We have to shift our paradigms and not thinking of people as homeless people. These are people who are experiencing an episode of homelessness. These are people who are experiencing substance abuse disorders. These are people who are experiencing mental health disorders or physical health disorders. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they're experiencing something at this point in time in their life, and we need to be there on the front lines to bring them in and say, hey, we can help you. We got you. That's what we're here for. And I think if we change our paradigm shift or shift our paradigms a little bit in the way we view homelessness, that could really impact how a lot of people actually come together, and we could end this thing, but only together can we end this thing.
Victoria, you mentioned, I'd say, a fairly high level of demand for medical services. That seems to be a very characteristic of your population. Were you getting, I think Halifax or Advent, somebody was going to donate some medical services to you? Is that accurate? Or?
Well, we have a health unit at First Step Shelter, and it is staffed by 2 nurses who are on the staff of Halifax Hospital. That health unit is funded through a grant from the Florida Blue Foundation, and also through money that's provided by Advent Health. So it's a combination of those entities that have created the health unit and provided the nursing staff for us. And in terms of equipment, I mean, they also have funded equipment. They funded the beds that are in there. They funded wheelchairs. They funded walkers. They've funded other medical equipment, simple equipment that the nurses use for health screenings. And so we have been very fortunate, and we do have we just have an awful lot. In fact, this morning, one of our residents went in to the Halifax for the second surgery he's had since he's come to see us. He can't walk. He has a serious leg injury. I don't know if he'll ever be able to walk, but he's back in the hospital as of this morning. And so, yeah, we do have our population is a people that do have an awful lot of health issues, both, a lot of physical health issues, but also a lot of mental health and substance abuse issues.
So do you get referrals through the courts?
We don't have referrals that come to us directly from the courts. We have had referrals that come to us from the jail, and we have referrals that come to us through law enforcement, but the courts haven't directly referred. But we do have a program at the shelter for people who are in the court system. It's a program in which they are able to, if they have an ordinance violation that's generally related to homelessness, which is like loitering or trespass or panhandling or something like that, instead of going back to court and then going perhaps and serving some time, they are considered time served if they are able to be successful in our program. And so we do have that relationship with the court, but not actually referrals from the court.
I see. So, Buck, you mentioned that Hope Place has served so many families going through. I have to ask, how many of the kids, are they back in school? Or are they going to school in place? Was that a choice, on your part in terms of how to handle the school situation?
Well, we did and do allow families to make their own decision on that. And as I think that our community probably is pretty reflective of the community in general, We have quite a few children that did go back to school, which personally would be my choice if I had a child that was school age at this point that did not have any other medical issues that would make it, not a good decision. But we also have some families who chose to keep their children at Hope Place, and they are doing their homeschooling, from Hope Place. And so we have families that have made both decisions, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case, again, reflecting what we're seeing in the community at large.
Okay, and you said you have a waiting list pretty much all the time for Hope Place services.
Mary, this is Nikki. I'm watching my watch, and unfortunately, Zoom has a time certain.
Right, we
And
do.
I want to, we might want to just see if anybody has one more or two more questions, because this is such a great conversation. I don't want anybody to go away without a question asked, but our Zoom session may just end, and I don't want that to happen.
Okay. Any questions out there? So. No?
If there aren't any questions, I'd like to throw one more thing out there, and that is this. One of the questions that you all provided was the question, what are unmet needs of the homeless population? And I would like to say that in my opinion, and again, I think this is something that League of Women Voters could get involved in, is that to me, the biggest unmet need of the homeless population is that there just simply are not enough community mental health services to serve the people in our community, whether they be homeless or not. And some estimates say that of the chronic homeless, that over 60% of them have mental illness. And a good friend of mine, Paul Gianfrido, who is the CEO of Mental Health America, he's actually written a book about how when he was elected to the state legislature of Massachusetts in the late 70s, that he was part of the process of changing the mental health system at the time. If you remember, that was back when we had the problems with all the state mental health hospitals, and he was part of a movement that started in states across the country to shut those down and to move to a community-based model of mental health. The problem is it was a great idea, but the funding did not follow the plan, and it never has followed the plan. And we still do not have a properly funded community health, mental health, program. And his book is about how he was part of creating this broken system that at the time he and his wife were trying to have children. They were never able to have children. They started adopting. Their first son that they adopted, they didn't find out till he was 17 years old. He was diagnosed as being schizophrenic, and his own son has lived on the streets of San Francisco for 25 years. So the book is about how he helped to create the system, this broken system that his own son has been a victim of. And so we've got to find a way of addressing these issues. So many of the people we deal with, whether they're individuals or families, are dealing with mental health issues. In fact, many of the people who have substance abuse issues are simply self-medicating for mental health issues. And we've got to figure out how we can address this at the community level and get people the help that they need.
I want to thank you for that, because the league has been watching the status of health in general in the state of Florida. Mental health funding in the state of Florida is one of the lowest in the nation. There's just no doubt about that. So, if there's legislation that comes up or things that fit our program as it's defined, let us know to see maybe we can weigh in and let them know, what needs to happen. We don't have a health committee now, but we're hoping to put one together. I am looking at the time, and I see Waylon offering to look at your facility. I think we might want to take you up on that once we're able to get out and be face-to-face again. I would like all of those on the program tonight to give a virtual round of applause to our three wonderful presenters. So everybody, thank you so much. We're very fortunate to have such knowledgeable, dedicated people in our community like you leading this charge, because it is certainly something that is important and makes a difference for our community. Before we leave, I do want to mention that we have some upcoming events so that you can mark them on your calendar. On September 26th, we have our next program, and that one is going to be on the ECHO and Volusia Forever initiatives. You know, those are going to be ballot initiatives, and we've got Melissa Lammers coming, talking to us about those programs and you know, looking at what they have funded and what the future might look like if we are going to pass that initiative. On October 7th, our league leaders, with Carla Christensen and I think Marianne is the other presenter, are going to be doing an overview of those ballot amendments. There are 6 statewide ballot initiatives that will be up for vote, as well as the 2 local, ECHO and Florida for Volusia Forever. And they will be explaining to you in a nonpartisan way what will happen if we do pass them and what will happen if we don't. October 24th, a very, very special event that's part of our social justice push this year. We're bringing in Trent Tomenko, who is an artist from Seminole State that does a beautiful program using art and music to show us how some of these racial stereotypes that we still have in place have developed over the years, so we can have a better understanding and start the conversation that's necessary so that we can work to social justice in this community. So we hope you'll mark your calendar for those. Now, before we leave, I do want to say that, you know, our programs are welcome, are open to the public in almost every occasion. And I do know, do we have any members of the public who are not members of the league who are on the line who could introduce themselves to us tonight? Any members of the public, not members of the league? Just unmute and introduce yourself. Anybody? Oh. How about any brand new members? Normally we're face to face and we can go up and shake your hand and get to know you. Unfortunately, we're not able to do this. Do we have any new members that would like to just say hello and let us know who you are? And it's okay if you're shy, you don't have to, but anybody.
Hi, this is Gaya Nunez. I'm a new member. I'm only a week old.
Yay.
And I'm thankful for this. Thank you guys. It was great to sit in and listen.
Well, welcome, Gaya, and we can't wait to actually meet you in person. And please keep joining us for these events. We're glad to have you.
Absolutely glad to be here.
Thank you. Any other new members? Well, with that, unless there's any other last-minute announcements, again, thank you to Waylon, Victoria, and Buck for a fascinating discussion tonight on a very important topic. And Marianne, thank you for setting all of this up.
Thank all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.